we are very grateful to be here today. Lights on, lights, camera, action, which we affectionately call LOCA, because let's face it, that's a mouthful. It came about, I've been working in the nonprofit sector in regards to substance misuse abuse for about 3.5 years. I became, I don't want to use the word fascinated, but indoctrined into it through the loss of my daughter in 2015. The anniversary of her death is actually in 14 days. Her circumstance was not known to us. She was very successful, had over $100,000 in her bank account, drove a car, was getting ready to be made partner with an insurance company, and still she lost her life through substance misuse. She played hard and she worked hard to this devastating disease. So I worked for a smaller nonprofit in South Carolina that was contained to a very affluential area, and realized I needed to do something different. This is a national crisis. With that being said, I contacted 4 like-minded people that are very near and dear to my heart. Julianne Berrios being one of them. She went to college with my daughter. They were best friends and roommates. And Julianne will share her story later. So we got together, and I knew I needed to use my background in film and television to marry this. And we decided not to reinvent the wheel, but the first thing that came to mind was Adam's Quilt, which I don't know if you're all familiar with. He was literally the first person to bring a powerful message to the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s that was successful for the first time in opening up barriers. And one of the projects that they started was quilt pieces. So people built quilts or quilt pieces, and then they would come to Washington, D.C., do this big walk in honor of AIDS and any other AIDS victims besides Adam. Long story short, the crusade became so massive that prior 9/11, before the White House had a huge gate around it, people from all over the country came, and I believe the world, came and added their quilt piece to the lawn, and it was so massive, it covered the entire White House lawn. Look it up if you don't know about it. It's really impressive. So that was kind of our foundation. We decided that we were going to stick with the wheel that was already working, but reinvent it to work for today. What do we all have? What do we all carry? None of us leave the house with our phones. Easy content upload capabilities. So we decided we were going to do that also, but we were going to create a mosaic. And we call our mosaic Your Voice, or Your Story, Your Voice. The reason we decided to do that is in my crusade and meeting many people both in the recovery world, still actively using, and parents and community lay people. When you don't have a voice, you do not begin the journey to recovery. You just don't. It's easy to put somebody in jail. It's easy to put them into a 30-day recovery plan. But that is forced. That is not organic, and that is not their voice. These people are not gum on the bottom of our shoe. They are American citizens. They deserve to be heard. We want to provide the door to open up their voice. So that's what our mosaic is. Your story, your voice. And of course, we became very excited and have some other influential, fantastic programs in place. But really right now, as a fledgling nonprofit who literally just launched their website yesterday, and we're so grateful to SIF for helping us get the word out there, this is our main focus. Let's save lives.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie. Would you also share with us the information in regards to Locus program and elaborate, especially for us today, on the film funding program?
That's a great question and a big part of Team Loca. Once again, my background is in film and television. I did leave the industry in 2015, but it just kind of keeps sneaking back in there, which it often does. We decided to provide, it was very important for us to provide a scholarship film-funded program through our donations, grant funding, etc. And that it was very important to do that because I am a firm believer, as are all of my partners, and I know, Julian, you concur, that film is a powerful tool. Film is an absolute powerful tool. And it also works not just with an older generation, but a younger generation who pays attention to film more than they do antiquated textbooks. It's just the facts. So we are very, very excited to film one annual documentary through our program that will pertain to the subject matter in regards to anything substance misuse, abuse. I want to clarify also that that incorporates human sexual trafficking. I mention that very intentionally because oftentimes one goes with the other. And there's a huge campaign of knowledge out there also in regards to human sexual trafficking, which is a devastating issue also facing our country. I bring that up also because while opioid addiction, well, substance misuse in general actually, takes more lives annually, and the numbers are staggering, Julian will cover that later, human sexual trafficking brings in more money. And I'm talking B as in boy in the billions. So that is why we are offering this scholarship. We can work through film to bring knowledge to our lay population.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that people are going to be really grateful that there's people like you out there because I know that there's a lot more going on in the world than people really realize. And it's very nice to have someone to go to that can help us in any way. Give us information, help us, lead us to the right people. So thank you for that. Okay, Julian, many lay people have a hard time understanding what an opioid use disorder is and why they should even bother paying attention to it. Would you please help us understand why it is critical our communities not only learn about our substance and misuse abuse in itself, but also understand community awareness is key to community recovery?
So addiction is a disease, and it's been nearly 70 years since the science and medical community have defined addiction as a chronic brain disease, and still today, many people think it's a moral failing, and this has been an opening segue to stigmatization, and it affects everyone. You have a family member, you have a friend, you have a neighbor, you have doctors, and more than 3/4 of people who develop addiction to opioids, whether it's a prescription or illicit, started using a prescription pain reliever, right? I mean, a lot of people are aware of the billions of dollars lawsuits going on right now with pharmaceutical companies, and I won't go into that. But contrary to people's perception, it doesn't always start with the doctor's prescription pad. It's also family and friends that give their prescription opioid to the person who is having chronic pain, and they sometimes don't think about it, and that's, you know, a family, a friend. And additionally, it's people that are unemployed in the low income with behavioral and mental issues that are having a misuse of opioids and have been in these at-risk populations, and it's been a horrible cycle of what a lot of people are going through, and it's touched many lives, and people have become victims of the epidemic. And it's important for the people that are here today to spread the word about LOCA and what we stand for, and to also build a relationship with whoever you are encountering that you suspect is having a drug use disorder, whether it's alcohol. And you might just think that, oh, that person just drinks maybe once a week or twice a week or a couple of drinks a day. It's not about quantity, it's about the effects, right? And the way to recognize it is their behavior changes that seem abnormal, whether they're not taking care of themselves. And you gotta build the trust, and it's a two-way street. If you feel like you're unable to help that person, you gotta help yourself to, especially if you're gonna be in that person's life. So, I think I answered your question as to why it's important to recognize this. It's become an epidemic. It's affecting everyone's lives, and the numbers that I have here, it's a bit antiquated because a lot of things aren't being reported, and there's not a global national reporting system. We have here that the opioid epidemic is considered the leading cause of death for Americans under 55. It's the leading cause of injury-related deaths, which is more than car accidents and homicide. And the opioid prescription pain relievers and heroin, as well as synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, are the main drivers of these opioid deaths. So 70,200 Americans died during opioid overdoses in 2017, and that accounts for more than 68% of opioid deaths. And these statistics are skewed. You have some people that are monetarily providing funds to the coroner to say that that's not an opioid-related death, right? And if you can think about it, for populations during the Vietnam, it's taken more lives than Vietnam War. It's taken more lives than 9/11. So this is your pastor, professional athlete, people that are having chronic pain. They sometimes really have to find other ways of seeking those reliefs. And it's unfortunate that it has to be through opioids, and there are other options out there for you.
Thank you, Julian. All right. Wow, it's just amazing how it's really sad that we all have to see so many people have this addiction, and it's really tough on our end when we don't really know how to sometimes reach out and help people. So again, I'm just very grateful that you guys are here. We got to start somewhere, right? I think it's time for all of us to band together and fight it, because it may just be up to us only. It's looking that way anyway. Anyways, okay, Susan Abercrombie, I would like for you to just kind of, as you came in from Georgia, right? Terrell, thank you, Terrell, for bringing her here. I'm very grateful for that. And we're going to take a few minutes and let Susan share her story with us. And I'll just let her take the floor at this point.
Sean, I think there's a DVD.
Okay. Well,
It would be like, okay, oh, that's a shame.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's, I went up there to ask, and so sorry.
It's all good. My name is Susan Abercrombie, and goodness, I need some support because it's going to be really hard for me to talk about what has happened. So bear with me. My son, Ethan Abercrombie, was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I've never been married. I'd been in a long-term relationship, and I had a son out of that relationship, and I decided that it was best if I raised him without the father, because I thought that the abstinence from the bad influence was better than, you know. So I made those choices and I raised him by myself. And he was the most beautiful little boy. He was so precious. When he was 2 years old, my mom's like, you have to spank him. And I'm like, I have to spank him? He's beautiful. I don't want to spank him. And he grew up to be a beautiful, beautiful young man. He was 6'2", just real easy on the eyes, you know, just beautiful. And not only that, he loved people. He was the life at every party. He was... his gifts, let me talk about his gifts because they mean so much to me. My son had the ability to forgive like no one I have ever met. And I'm 60 years old. This young man came into this world with this ability to forgive others. And unconditionally, I have never, ever, I have a wonderful mother and siblings, but I've never been loved so unconditionally other than the love I experienced from Ethan. And he really understood me in a very close, intimate way. And boy, that's something that, you know, I really, really miss today is those big, long arms. You know, he was 6'2", and that beautiful smile, and he was musically talented. He just came in with this gift of music, and he played everything. But the piano, when he sat down to the piano, that became his choice of expressing his. He wrote music when he was 13 years old. I mean, it was music that Carlos Santana would have purchased. I mean, it was kind of that, you know, in that tone or in that type of music. He liked everybody from Beethoven to Percy Sledge and Otis Redding. If anybody knows who that is, you know, it's old blues musicians. Now, this kid was full of life and he had a deep, deep soul. Very, very talented young man, very intelligent young man. At 2 years old, he was riding a skateboard. He was never an infant. He came into this world just grown almost, you know. But he had an accident, a really, really bad motorcycle accident. And to prevent from probably breaking his neck, he injured his left leg and knee extremely bad. It was an extremely bad tear, and had to have surgery. And the surgery was never successful. It stayed swollen and it was a hideous looking knee. I saw some pictures of it just recently in one of his old phones, and it reminded me of just how bad the surgery was and what the knee looked like afterwards. And he was a professional wakeboarder. He was either on the water all summer and on the snow all winter. And so he just kept the knee aggravated even more. Of course, you know, you're going to get pain medication when you go to have surgery. So it started there. So the pain medication, he finally kicked that, but began to drink extremely bad. And I can't talk enough about the gifts, the capabilities. He taught himself how to do demolition work. He taught himself how to operate heavy equipment. You know, I ride a Harley Davidson. He rode a Harley Davidson. You know, we had a lot of great times together. I miss him so much, but let me go back to what took place. In July of 2018, he left for the lake for the week. The 4th of July is his favorite holiday, so he's at the lake, and he's been there for 7 days. And he called me on a Sunday and said, "Mom, I'm coming home." And I said, "Well, you need to come home. It's been about 7 days, you know. My gosh, come on back to reality here and go to work, you know, or something." But so that evening, I didn't know that Ethan didn't come home, and he had a lot of ladies in his life, you know, and he loved Ashleys. He had like 3 or 4 Ashleys. I can remember that. But anyway, so he had this young lady who I had begged him to not be around, and she really wasn't our problem, but she certainly wasn't our solution. And I felt a deep darkness in this young lady, and somehow he got with her, and they went back to her home, and he had been drinking a lot, and someone gave my son the drug methadone, which is controlled by our government, and it's given to people to come off of opiates. I don't think that he had ever done methadone before. It's very, it is really controlled. It's hard to find it on the streets. But I do know that the clinics that give the methadone on Saturday, they give you your Sunday dosage. It's liquid because they're not open on Sundays. So someone gave my child methadone, and because he had a real high level of alcohol in his system, he was not sober. One thinking with a sober mind, too smart for this. And you know, the details, I know I'm taking a while, but I want to talk the details. That around 12 o'clock that night, he fell asleep with this young lady, and she had been videoing the two of them together and sending it to a young lady that he had been with at the lake. And you know, and she videoed my son breathing distressfully, from what I understand, but would not call 911. And I really want to talk about that, because if those are the facts. You know, we need to say, let your age, you know, you be aware of who you're around, because if something happens, someone's going to video it, or not pick up the phone and call 911 if she didn't video it. And you know, he could have been saved at that point, because every medic, police officer, they have the drug, I forget what it's called. Narcan, yes, you know, which will bring them out of the overdose, and if at the right timing. But anyway, she didn't do that, and she Snapchatted a few things and just, you know, went back to sleep. And around 6:30 a.m., I think he was probably dead before the EMT got there. She did finally call the EMT around 6:30 a.m., but he was distressfully breathing at 12 that night. And that medic just happened to be one of Ethan's friends. And so I was telling you, I have a whole new respect for those that are, you know, chosen that line of work. And can you imagine what it was like for that young lady? I was told that it was a hot July day, and when they brought Ethan into the hospital, I think he was already dead, and because I've spoken to her, the medic, but she's on top of the gurney, wringing wet with sweat, and she's pumping that heart, and she's trying her best to save him. And the charge nurse was a dear, dear friend of mine, and she had to come into a room and tell me that he didn't suffer, he died no pain, and what a wonderful young man he was. You know, she knew him, and I'm telling you, God has been so good to me through this whole process. I hope to be a part of something like this again, because I would love to tell you, take the time to tell you things that I did that I know not to do now. For almost 30 years, I've had the great honor of going into jails and institutions. I have been in level 5 penitentiaries, you know, with murderers and people that really have issues, and carried the message of recovery and not been nervous, but excuse me for shaking, but you know, he meant so much to me. He gave me purpose in my life, and he gave so many other people purpose. There were like almost 500 people at this young man's funeral. People waited 2.5 hours to talk to Ethan's mother at a viewing. The pastor that did the service was a friend of Ethan's, and his son was a friend of Ethan's. They're musicians, and that was the worst day of my life, but God brought so much honor to that day through Jay Bailey. I can't say enough about how he knew Ethan so personally, and he just did this wonderful job of seeing our family through that day, that process, and is still there with us to this day, and many other people that you know, came to the hospital immediately. Look at his Facebook page. We were going to have some pictures, but it didn't work, and this didn't work. Look at those Facebook pictures, and you'll see the life that he lived. He lived well. He lived big, and he traveled, and I'm so grateful for that, because he was only here for 29 years, you know. I think I better stop with that. But thank you so much for this opportunity. God bless you. Thank you. I'm so glad I got to meet you. I believe in what you're doing. You're gonna make an impact on our country. What you're doing, the effort that you're putting into it, and also you, and of course you. I am just so grateful. Thank you so much. I hope what I said touched someone here today, or will reach some person, some parent, some young person. And it really means a lot to me. And as I continue to work through this process, with some notes, I'll get better at it. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today, and I know that wasn't real easy, so I'm very grateful that you're here. It will help many to be able to look at or look for some signs, of a loved one that they may have that's going through some things like that, or even if there's someone here that may be going through it. So it's very important that we have each other to share this information with, so we can help many, as many as we possibly can. Educational. I mean, we have to be educated to be able to help anyone. So, and Terrell, and Sarah, I just want to thank both of you guys too for what you're doing with your movie, and because it's just, I hope that it will help jumpstart many more people doing this too, because again, we have to band together and try to help as many people as we can, because it's happening way more than we even have a clue about. So, real quick, Julian, how is opioid disorder different from opioid misuse?
Opioid misuse, it's an educational thing that we need to be responsible of. When you go to see your provider and you are prescribed something that is considered a non-cancerous pain management medication, because let's face it, it's just really easy to write a prescription. You're handed it. That's what has become a habit, a behavioral habit for a lot of providers, and as well as the healthcare system that we're involved in. And that's another conversation that we can have at a later date. But all to say, to recognize these behaviors in others, you need to develop a relationship with them, and build trust is most important. Building trust and respecting that person, whether they want to seek treatment or not. But as long as you can be a friend and be kind, those are some of the best first steps ever.
Thank you so much, Julian. Okay, we're going to go to Terrell now. Hi, Terrell. Going back to what you do for a living and your company, I would like for you to take for a few minutes to let us know about exactly what you do, how long you've been doing it, and about your company.
Thank you. I actually started a film festival in my hometown of Macon, Georgia in 2005. So I've been in the indie film world for a long time. And Georgia is now one of the biggest states in the country for the film industry. But that didn't happen until about 3 years after we started our film festival. So in Georgia, I'm like a grandfather of film festivals. But through that process, I've just met a lot of filmmakers over the years, heard a lot of different stories, been actually participatory in several very small indie films, and I produced it basically, but never considered myself a producer. So fast forward all these years, and my wife and I, almost 2 years ago, moved to Atlanta to kind of really emerge, do nothing but film, and as far as being a producer. And I was, shortly after we moved here, went to an art opening of a friend of mine who I'd also worked on a film with. And Sarah Beth was working on that film. Had not seen her in like 10 years maybe, close to it. And then she was at the show, the art opening, and so she's like, I've got this thing, I know you moved to Atlanta, I'd like you to read this script. So that's how I got involved with Sarah Bess's film. But I have Film Georgia, which is filmgeorgia.com, which is an online resource for the film and television industry. So that's basically all I'm doing now is just film. I've got a PR and marketing background, so I am the one that kind of gets the word out about whatever it is. And I met Susan in Columbus. I had connected a director and a producer out of South Carolina I also host a party at Sundance called Choose Georgia. And Columbus, the Columbus Film Office is one of my big sponsors. And they were there at Sundance last year. This other filmmaker was there. They connected, started talking, ended up going to Columbus to film their movie Electric Jesus. I got invited to the investor party in Columbus and was sitting at a table. Susan was sitting right next to me, to my left. And she's like, well, what do you do besides, everybody here is talking about you because you're the reason they came to Columbus to film this movie. What do you do besides introducing incredible people to each other? I'm like, well, I produce films, mainly indie, and she's like, what are you working on? I'm like, I'm actually working on this film, Life Bonder, and when I started talking about it, I'm like, it's about the opioid crisis. She's like, she is the sweetest, happiest, like really upbeat person. All of a sudden, her whole facial, she just went like zombie, and her eyes glassed over. And her boyfriend was sitting next to her, and he's like, Susan's son just has died of an opioid overdose within this past year. So that's how we started talking. But this whole crisis, and it is a crisis, after I came on board with this, I liked the concept, but even I didn't realize what a crisis it really was until we were doing cast and crew interviews, and one of the questions we asked all the cast and crew during this process was, what was your connection to drug abuse? Do you have a connection with drug abuse? And everybody has it. So I was sitting there during this whole process and thinking, have I really been affected by it? And I have. 2 of my cousins have died from it. 2 other cousins are struggling seriously with it. But thinking about it, everybody's connected to this. Everybody's got a connection, and it has absolutely nothing to do with how educated, how well educated, little educated, how wealthy you are, how poor you are. Black, white, yellow, red, it does not matter. This is something that affects everybody the same. There's a lot of different avenues of how people get into it. A lot of the people I know started out with a prescription from a doctor for some kind of pain thing that they got addicted. But I was at another friend of mine who was, she was a famous actor, gorgeous, she was way too smart to be an actor, quite frankly. She was brilliant. She could have been like an astrophysicist. She was drop dead gorgeous and she was incredibly talented. But she should have been producing and directing and kind of gotten away from the acting. But she was the star of 2 television series and many movies, 44 years old, and she dies. And Twitter's burning up what happened to Lisa Sheridan, how did she die? Everybody's thinking she committed suicide because she's still young, she's still gorgeous. I knew she had a drug problem. And went to her funeral, but the publicist came on and they're like, the family just says that this is not a suicide. But it's just burning up on Twitter. Why? How? There was never an answer. They never addressed it. I went to the funeral, and as far as sellout goes, it was a huge church, standing room only. Never ever addressed the issue of what happened to her. And I'm like, this is such a missed opportunity to educate people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she was at the top of her game, gorgeous, rich, I mean, everything going for her, and she was a drug addict. And they should have taken that as a spotlight to talk about this problem, and they did not. And that kind of even fueled me more about my whole thing for this is starting a communication. Getting people to be able to share their story. And the big thing is what I've kind of come to realize, and which is why I love Susan so much, is the parents of especially children that this happens to, there is this sense of shame that is not theirs to wear. And that is the problem. Because if the parents aren't telling people about it, and they're not even telling their friends about it, they're keeping it in, so Susan's friends will know what to look for in their own children. But my friends' parents that don't say anything, they had a heart attack at 23. Bullshit. I mean, they might have had a heart attack at 23, but there's a reason they had it when they're perfectly healthy. So it's that shame that the parents or the family, they wear that coat of shame, and they're never gonna heal. She's gonna be great because she's doing this, she's letting it out, she's talking to people, she's letting people love her, support her, and at the same time, she's helping so many other people. And by helping other people, she's helping herself heal. So that's my thing about this particular thing, is we've got to talk about it. And we've got to let people that are sitting in Q&As at film festivals, I've got a film festival background, and I know a film like this is something that will make people cry, make people get up and maybe confess for the first time their experience. And start a process of healing for them, but also educating the other people that are in the room about the problem. Because
breaking down the barriers of stigma.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing,
Yeah.
because it is affecting everybody. You know, it's just a lack of communication about it. So that's what I want to do with this film, is to give it legs, give it a voice, and give people an opportunity to be involved in a conversation and find a solution for it. So.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I completely agree with you. Like, we just, you know, one of the things that I keep hearing over and over from people is, oh, this will never happen to my son or my daughter, or, you know, and the fact is that it could. And
it could have already,
have already happened, yeah.
And they don't know.
Yeah. And until they're able to look for the signs, know what to look for, on any part of it, whether it be the you know, just the opioid misuse or addiction, or, you know, the sex trafficking. You know, I mean, it's just a really bad problem that it's time for us to address.
And you know, one thing I do want to say about this, and another thing is that, and this is just something for everybody to watch for when people do go to drug rehab, because my cousin and my friend Lisa, it's exactly the same thing that happened to them. And this is very, very common. They've got a drug problem, each of them were addicted to heroin. They go in to rehab for 3 months. They are completely clean when they come out. Well, they go back to their dealer and get some more, and they do the same amount as they did before they went into rehab, when their body had a tolerance to it. And that'll kill them immediately because they're completely overdosed, because I don't know how you do it, if you're shooting up, or how they measure it, but they're used to that measurement, or that quantity. Like if you're an alcoholic and 3 drinks is what you normally drink, or 4 or 6 or whatever, and then you've gone to rehab and you are completely clean, and then you drink 6 drinks, well, you could die from that instead of just 1 or 2, because that's gonna make you drunk. And if you come back and do, I don't know, 1 line of cocaine as opposed to an 8 ball of cocaine, after your body has been completely cleansed from it, yeah, that's what kills you. So people that have family members or friends that have have just come out of rehab, that's when they need to be really, really watched.
Can I share something real quick? But what he is talking about also is fentanyl. You mentioned
Yeah.
fentanyl. And, you know, that's the big moneymaker right now. Those that are selling to countries that are selling fentanyl to our country. And a dear friend of mine is captain over special ops, so I get a lot of information from her. We share information. You met Debbie.
Yeah.
Daily we share information, but the drug dealers that are putting the fentanyl in marijuana, ecstasy, heroin, it's going in everything now. You know, there's a new drug.
The vape too.
The vape, exactly.
Kids were innocently vaping.
Right, and see, these are not chemists that are out there putting the fentanyl in the drug, whatever it is they're mixing the fentanyl with to enhance the high of that particular drug. So you never know which marijuana joint or which shot of heroin or whatever is going to have too much of the fentanyl that's going to drop you dead, you know?
Like
And
Russian roulette.
exactly, it is, but it doesn't stop them from doing it.
But you know, another thing about the fentanyl thing is, let's say you're at a party and somebody gives you something that's got fentanyl in it and you're not a drug addict. You take it, you will die right then and there, the first time you ever do it. So that's what's so scary. That's another thing that has nothing to do with addiction.
That's right.
It has nothing, that's why it's so scary. It has nothing to do with addiction. Just, you got somebody gave you something and you tried it because they were doing it and you got the one that had the fentanyl in it. Even cigarettes, and imagine they're putting it in alcohol. You don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to address something. Also, just for your knowledge, if you do witness an overdose and there is illicit drugs around, or I mean even if you are around drugs that are illegal and you have somebody that has overdosed, you will not get in trouble for calling 911. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. You are protected from that. So that is something that a lot of people don't realize, that, oh shit, I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm gonna get in trouble for having these things around me, and you know, they freak out and they leave the scene. And another thing, when it comes to opioid overdose, if that person is experiencing respiratory distress, naloxone can help, but there's a difference between respiratory distress and respiratory failure. Respiratory failure is impending death to a point where you're going to have to start doing CPR. And I really highly recommend everyone, I mean, you got YouTube University, right? You can learn how to do CPR. You pump that chest, you breathe for them, and try to revive them, and then alert 911. Get help. And those are another thing, you know, a lot of people are afraid to touch somebody who might be dying in front of them. I witness it all the time in my line of work. And I work in EMS, I'm a medic. And for those that aren't aware, just because there is Narcan available, the stigmatization that is just, oh, it's not gonna help them with recovery. Well, hey, it's a lifesaver, all right? It's just a lifesaver, that's it. It takes, building trust, communicating, it takes educating and having a support system to really penetrate that person's, dignity. They don't want to be what they
I
are.
want to say, we're visiting from the state of South Carolina, and to address your question, in South Carolina, which is something that can easily be, you have to talk to your policy and game changers in your personal state. There have been large amounts of grant money that have been funded through the government to facilitate some of our sober living facilities, and many nonprofits have actively advocated for them to go and do, with their federal funding, training. So there are a lot of training sessions. You can find them on Facebook groups. You can find them if you do a Google search. They're called Narcan training, and they are provided several free kits. I have been to several. I have 6 or 7 kits on me at all times, and they have all been free. You sit there, they don't just give them to you. You have to sit through a training session, which should be. You should know how to use it properly. And so I think that if we all work together and empower and make sure these organizations have the money and the resources to use professionals from their organizations to go out and educate the public, that is also a service where you as lay people can have Narcan sitting in your pocketbook or your camera bag. It's doable. It's just up to us to make it happen.
And one more thing, just because we have the title as first responders, really, it's the family, it's the friends, it's the bystander that's walking down the street and sees somebody fall that are the first responders, and it's best to always educate yourself and continue that education of knowing what to do. Don't be afraid to touch that person. You're not going to get in trouble. All right?
Thank all of you for all of that information. And as far as the Good Samaritan law that they have, I think you can get in more trouble by not speaking up than you can by speaking up. So I encourage everyone to do that. I know that my daughter was out with some friends that she worked with and actually saved someone's life that got her hands on some cocaine and was drinking with it, and it had fentanyl in it. Because she knew CPR from working with children, she saved her life as the paramedics were on their way. So it's just very important to keep ourselves educated on CPR. I totally agree with that. We all need to know how to do it. They should be teaching it in schools. I believe that with all my heart. So thank you guys for all that information. That's very helpful for everyone, and I'm grateful that we can get that out there. So I'm going to go ahead and mute Sarah. Sarah Bess. I want to talk a little bit about your movie and what drove you to tell us what exactly it's about, what drove you to write it and direct it and produce it, and with Terrell, and just kind of give us some information about what that is, and I think we're going to share it with everyone, the trailer.
Alrighty, well, I started writing about 2 years ago a film called Lifebinder. It really started around 2014 with a concept of a film that had to do with neurology, because my grandmother had just passed, she had a stroke, and so I became very interested in the brain and how it works, and then I segued into understanding like pleasure receptors and just dopamine and these natural chemicals that our brain do make. And then I worked on a couple films, shelved it, and then in 2016 I had an unfortunate tragedy of a childhood best friend overdosing, and I brought it back out, and my husband Pedro encouraged me to write a story, and then also to write a story that like meant something. So I sat there and did what now I know was me working through grief and wrote a story to kind of take personal experiences that I know that friends of mine who do battle addiction have faced, and stories, and kind of just combine them all to tell this one story, a coming of age story of 4 friends that are in a teenage rock band, and that's just selfishly because I love music and wanted to live vicariously through one of the characters and be in a band, which I never was, but now I have been. So I wrote these characters, and with the mindset that they go through this journey of losing a close friend when they're in their teens through an opioid overdose, and then following them, or catching up with them rather, 10 years later when they're in their late 20s, and kind of picking the story back up with, this is what everything looks like after something like this. And some of it's pretty, some of it's masked with lies, some of it's really ugly, some of it's really sad, some of it's stuck. And you see kind of all these different which ways that something like this can really affect you. And that choice was made mainly because I work in the industry and have always been a movie lover, and realized that the power of film and media just in general is a great vehicle to teach people without being stale, like toast in health class, where we don't listen, because I know I didn't listen, and I sure as heck did things I probably shouldn't have done, and I'm sitting on this panel acting self-righteous, but really it's because I know. And so I wrote it from the perspective of a 16-year-old girl who, I was 16 once, and then, now I'm in my mid-30s, and seeing myself understand things as I traveled from 16 to understand things at 27, 28, 29. And so I used that time frame because I think I had a lot of, as most 20-somethings, a lot of personal growth where you're like, whoa, this is what that was, this is what that was. And so that's the perspective of Blair, the protagonist. She loses her sister and her bandmate, and then has all these like dramatic things pop up at the eve of the 10-year anniversary of her sister's death. And so that's the story. And really, it was to work through my personal grief. And then once I started doing that, I realized, wow, there's so many people that have gone through this. And yeah, man, it just, you realize that it's something that we do need to communicate, like Terrell said. And really everyone is build a community of people who are gonna use it as a tool to break the stigma. Because there's so many times too where in film it's glamorized. And I chose children because I feel like that's when we make these stupid mistakes that lead to addiction. And it is a neurological pattern in the brain. And if we don't start the pattern, then maybe we won't have to carry around Narcan. I wouldn't honestly like to have to carry it around. So that's the goal, is to just say, hey, before you see this, maybe you'll identify with one of these characters, and maybe you don't want your life to go the way that theirs did. Because even in the most glamorous character's story, there's a lot of tragedy, and there's a lot of lies and pain. So that is Lifebinder. And there's cool music, because it's not just educational. And there's lots of drama and twists and turns, like every good story. So we're excited to share the trailer with you guys.
Would you guys hit the projector button?
Just be the video audio.
Yeah.